Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And some cards using some new Honeybee products. Honeybee had a big release earlier this month. Their most recent release. I'll have a link to it in the description box below the video. It is huge. Lots of great products. And I didn't even know where to begin, but I ended up pulling out the Paradise Plumerias stamp set. This was designed by Kelly Taylor. You guys know me. Big florals. Love it. And then I pulled out some oldie but goodie Honeybee products, and I pulled out my Nuvo shimmer powders. I haven't used these in a while. Love them. I have a link, or I will have a link at the end of this video in the end screen to my playlist using shimmer powders. Specifically, I use the Nuvo ones, and I have videos using the Lindy's Magicals. They work very similarly. And yeah, we're going to do some just sprinkling of shimmer powders and making a huge mess that turns into some really fun little florals. And I also used one of the new Distress Spritz. If you're not familiar with these, they're new from the Tim Holtz Distress line. Tim Holtz did a video on these, so go to his channel if you're not sure, because he lays it all out, explains it, gives demos, all the things, all that info. And yeah, I've used these in a couple of recent videos. I've just been having fun with them. So I use that too, just to add a little extra shimmer, you know? And yeah, like I mentioned, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. So it helps pay the bills and keep the channel going. And yeah, let's get into making these cards. So I started off with some Canson XL watercolor paper. With the Nuvo shimmer powders, it doesn't matter what brand of watercolor paper, as far as the ones I've, experimented with. But Canson's generally just my go-to because I have tons of it and it's cheap. So I've got my watercolor paper. I just took a full sheet, cut it in half again. So I've got 4 panels. So then I was like, I'm going to do extras and we're going to make multiple cards. Why not? So I lined up the 2 big floral clusters from the Honeybee Stamps Paradise Plumerias stamp set. And I'm using my anti-static powder tool on all of these pieces of watercolor paper. That just helps prevent the embossing powder from sticking to anything other than the stamped images. And then stick that back into my MISTI, and I'm stamping the images with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And normally with regular watercolor, I say you don't need to heat emboss the images. You can just stamp and watercolor, do your thing. With shimmer powders and doing it this way, if I was just going to watercolor with them, you don't need to heat emboss. You can just do your thing, paint with the powders, it's fine. But sprinkling the powders on and spraying with water like I'm going to show, and I've shown in, like I said, many other videos, I do think heat embossing helps because those raised edges keep things a little more contained, which you'll see because I spray this heavily with water, like super heavy. It's going to look like a hot mess. That is just part of the process. It's part of the process. You embrace it. So I laid out my flour sack cloth. This is just to help contain some of it because, again, it gets messy. And then the shimmer powders. With these ones specifically, these Nuvo ones, do not squeeze the bottle. Don't do it. Trust me. I've done it like once, and the amount that comes out is insane. Like a teaspoon's worth. Like, you just don't squeeze the bottles. You don't need to, because these have a lot of pigment. It does vary by color. You just got to experiment with them. Certain colors are way more intense and you need way less, and some you need more. It's one of those things where you just got to play with them, and they are fun. So the 2 I used are Lilac Waterfall and Falling Leaves. And like most of these shimmer powders, like the Nuvo ones, the Lindy's ones, they're generally a mixture of different colors and shimmers. And that's kind of the beauty of it. Doing it like this is when you just sprinkle them and spray water, the colors like break up. So I always say, like, don't do it. Don't mess with it. Just leave it. Let it dry. I messed with these ones. I couldn't help myself. But I was more so just kind of moving some of the color around to fill in areas that just missed. You know, some of the areas in the leaves didn't have any color. So I would just use a little paintbrush and kind of move it around. I was also breaking up. You can't really see it on camera, but some areas where the powder just refused to break up with the water, I would just kind of swirl it with my brush to move it around. But I tried not to do too much. You know, I tried not to muck with it too much because, again, the beauty of these is letting them do their own thing. You know, the colors that kind of move around and migrate and just pop out that you wouldn't expect. That's where half the fun is, in my opinion. So when I'm using these, I tap my finger on the bottom of the bottle. You know, there's a seam on the bottom of the bottles, and sometimes I will use my fingernail and just kind of run it across that seam, and that's all you need. And you know, the powder comes out. That's it. And then you just experiment with it. So when I spray the water, again, I'm holding the bottle quite high at first you just let that mist sort of fall onto the watercolor paper, because if you spray too close up, the force of the spray will push the powders right off the paper, you know? So I hold it up very, very high and just let it mist down. And then I go in heavy and add, as you can see, a ton of water. It's messy, but it's fun. And then you gotta leave it. You gotta let it dry. And it takes a while to dry, especially if you're going heavy-handed like I am with the amount of water, but that's okay. I also do go back here and there. I add more of the purple because the Lilac Waterfall, it's one of those ones where it is lighter, but honestly, I could have just left it all as is. I didn't need to add more, but I can't help myself. I can't help myself. So like everything, do as I say, not as I do, you guys. So once I was using my magnets too, because that is the thing. And I've shown that in other videos with the shimmer powders. A lot of times I will tape down what I'm working on, like tape it to my hardboard, which is, you know, in the corner there. Because when you are adding heavy amounts of water, the paper immediately starts to curl up and then everything wants to run off. So since I didn't want to tape all of these down, I just wasn't in the mood. I was using my magnets to hold it. Anything heavy will work. You know, just to hold everything kind of flat. And then I actually transfer that onto my little hardboards and I would just hold those down just to keep everything somewhat flat so that the water and the color isn't just running off the edges. And then you let them air dry. You can speed it up a little bit with a heat tool, but it's just let it dry. You know, walk away from it, go do something else. So this is my favorite way to use these. But you can also just put a little bit of powder onto a palette. You know, swirl a wet paintbrush into it. I've shown that in other videos as well. And you've got just pretty shimmery watercolors. It works great like that as well. And that obviously gives you more control. This, you have very little control. I have a lot of practice using these. So, because I get asked that, how do you get the color where it needs to go? Practice, you know, and some of it, I just don't care. You know, some areas, the green got onto the flowers. I'm fine with that. I don't care. You know, and the purple got onto some of the leaves. It's fine. You know, everything's shimmery and fabulous. So I let them dry, and that's where you get just the magic, you know, because it does look like a hot mess when it's wet, but once it's dry, the shimmer is there. I'll try and show at the end. I still had a hard time really capturing this on camera. They're shimmery and sparkly and amazing. So after everything was dry, and they need to be dry, I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut them. And then I set those aside. And then I pulled out this vintage Flora background stamp from Honeybee. They've done a few now, just a small handful of red rubber background stamps. And this one came out, I think, earlier this year. It's so pretty. It's so pretty. The detail in this one is just fabulous. So because it's a red rubber on cling foam, I took the grip mat out of my MISTI and I just put one of my sticky mats in here because the sticky mat is thin. And I took 3 panels of some smooth white cardstock. These are just A2 sized panels, which I should have done bigger panels, but I'll get to that in a second. And the same thing, I used my anti-static powder tool on those, stuck them into my MISTI, and then I'm stamping this background with just clear embossing ink. Very boring, looks like nothing. So I'd stamp it, and then I'm using Hero Arts White Satin Pearl embossing powder. I've used this many times over the years. This is one of those ones where I'm kind of tempted to get more of them and put them into one of my bigger containers. Because every time I use this embossing powder, I'm reminded of how utterly gorgeous it is. It's subtle, but it's so gorgeous. On white cardstock, it gives it this pearly, slightly metallic finish. But again, it's subtle. On dark cardstocks, it almost gives like a silver look, especially on black. It gives it like a pearly silver look. It's beautiful embossing powder. Anyway, poured it over the backgrounds, repeated the process, and then melted it with my heat tool. And this is always where I'm reminded, like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful embossing powder. And this background, I was like, I didn't even want to cover it up with the florals because it's really pretty. Like there's so much detail, and yeah, the stamp just captured it. The embossing powder just captured it. It's fabulous. I love it. So melted all of these panels with the heat tool, and yeah, I should have done them just bigger pieces instead of A2 sized, because I decided to use see right there, like, isn't that beautiful? That's so beautiful. Love it. So yeah, my brain stopped. Okay, back to what I was doing. I got distracted. Magpie. Before I do any die cutting, I'm going to add just a little extra shimmer, because why not? So the Distress Spritz in Wilted Violet. And like I said in the intro, you can check out Tim Holt's YouTube channel. He did an entire video on these. They're just shimmery, splattery goodness. So of course I had to order them, and I'm having fun with them. I just did a light spritz on all 3 of these panels. So again, it's subtle, nothing too crazy. But as always, hard to capture on camera, but in real life, it's just a subtle purple sparkliness on these backgrounds. And I love it, because I didn't want it to be too crazy, because I didn't want it to be competing with the main florals. So I sprayed those, I let those dry, and then I pulled out, this is an oldie but goodie. These are the SCALLOP A2 wafer dies, or like they're nesting. There's like multiple sizes, but this is the A2 sized one from Honeybee. They're still available. I'll have a link to them with supplies. But yeah, it would have been just easier if I had, used bigger pieces of cardstock, but I was able to make this work. You can see the largest die in the set is just shy of A2 sized. So to actually make these work, I just taped the wafer die to the backgrounds with my Tonic Craft Perfect tape to be able to die cut these without anything shifting, because it just barely, I had very little clearance on these. And then I can just peel off the tape. A couple times I kind of tore a little bit, because it also adds a pierced like stitching detail around the edges, but I wasn't worried about that, because when I adhere them to the card bases, it'll adhere everything down. It'll be fine. So I die cut all those panels, set them aside. Another oldie but goodie favorite set of mine. This is the Big Time Kindness set from Honeybee. And I pulled out some just scraps of lavender cardstock from my stash, put them into my MISTI, inking everything up with the same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I'd used my antiseptic powder on those pieces of cardstock, stamp the sentiments. Gonna heat emboss these with just the clear embossing powder. You don't need to heat emboss these sentiments. I do it because if I don't heat emboss them, I will smear this. This ink can take a while to dry, especially on like color cardstocks, things like that. And if I stamp a sentiment with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and I don't heat emboss it, I can pretty much guarantee you I am going to smear it. It just happens. I can't help myself. So I heat emboss it. Saves me the hassle. Plus it does add that extra, it gives it that little raised edge and the shine. So why not? So once those were heat embossed, I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut all of these, taping everything into place like always to prevent it from shifting when I run these through my die cut machine. And then off camera, I also die cut scraps of the same cardstock with those wafer dies, so that I can like pop these up with a little bit of dimension, because it just saves me from having to fiddle with foam squares. Plus I only want a little dimension, but I'll get to that a little later. So I have everything die cut, everything's ready to go. So I'm going to adhere those scallop embossed, spritzed background panels to the card base. And with things like that, especially when I'm doing multiples, I stick them under my MISTI. Stack of books would work too. Just something to hold them flat. The MISTI is just perfect because it's right there. So I just stick it under there. I can put 2 card bases, as you can see right there. Stick them under the MISTI. I just need something to hold it flat, and I can go on and do the next one. So I adhere those directly to the card bases. My card bases are top folding A2 white note cards. So adhere the backgrounds to the card bases. stuck them under my MISTI, left that to sit, and I'm going to do the same thing with the florals. I had figured out, you know, how I wanted to do all of this because I had many pieces of these florals that I had done. So I adhered the branches to the cards, used all those up, and then used one of the like individual clusters on the third card. Adhered them, stuck them under my MISTI for a few minutes, and then flipped them over and trimmed off whatever was hanging over the edges with my scissors. Once all that was adhered, I decided I needed to add more splatter. And this is where I really made a mess. I got black gouache absolutely everywhere. It happens. It happens. I'm fine with it. So I used my splat box regardless, but I still managed to make a mess. And then, yeah, some black gouache, put it on my little palette, added a little water to thin it down, and then used my fan brush and added some splatter. Just 'cause. Why not? You know, if you don't like it, don't do it. That's the beauty of crafting and all the things, you know. Take what you want from the content and then do what you want with what you're making. So I added splatter to all of these, and yeah, just got it everywhere. It was everywhere. Set those aside to dry, and then adhered the sentiments with the extra pieces. I only added one extra layer because this was heavyweight cardstock anyway. So, and I didn't want like a ton of dimension. I just wanted that little extra bit. So I just adhered one additional layer behind each of these sentiments. And again, just using my little craft tacky glue. Love it. There we go. Got those adhered. And then I'm just going to adhere the sentiments to each of the card fronts and just kind of chose whichever ones that fit. I decided not to add any other sentiments. There's like many sentiments in that set. That set is huge. But I decided not to add any other sentiments to the insides. I just adhered the remaining shimmery little floral clusters to each of the cards on the inside. So adhered it, same thing, kind of let a little bit hang off. Once it was dry, flipped them over, trimmed it off with the excess off with my scissors, and then left that. That just keeps these cards, again, I've talked about this before, sometimes it's nice to have them a little more open-ended so they're not specifically for one occasion, you know, just a thank you or just a birthday or whatever. It's more like hello friend, so it could be birthday, thank you, thinking of you, get well soon, you know. It's nice to have those in the stash, and then if I want, I could add a stamp sentiment on the inside, you know, when it's time to use the card. That works too. So my last little bit of embellishment, because go big or go home. These are the Let's Party gem stickers. This was from the previous release. The colors just worked. There's these kind of periwinkle colors that just went with these. They don't really show up on camera because my camera goes nuts over like shimmer and all of the things. But yeah, they're self-adhesive. So I just use my little honeybee like die pick, peel them off, stick them into place, and that finished off these cards. So yeah, the shimmer, my camera was not agreeing with me when I was filming this. I just couldn't do it justice. Same with the sparkle in the background. But yeah, they're shimmery, sparkly, all the little colors just doing their thing. That background stamp, chef's kiss, these big florals, love, great big sentiments, all the things, and the splatter. Love it. And that scalloped edge. So yeah, as I said in the intro, I will have a link to the playlist that I've done there's dozens upon dozens of videos that I've done over the years using the Nuvo powders as well as the Lindy's Magical powders. So I'll link to that at the end of the video. And then in the description box directly below the video is where I'll have the link to my blog post, supply list, link to all of the supplies I used. You can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. It helps a ton. I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.